In this session, we're going to do a deep dive into personal awareness. And there are a number of activities that are all about you. So you'll get out of this session what you put into it. So I'm going to guide you through some ideas for what you might want to consider about how you work and how you come across to others. As we saw in the opening session of relationship building, ultimately there are two factors that come together. Our personal awareness, which is made up of both self-assessment and emotional assessment, and then our personal leadership, which we'll look at in the next session. So let's start with our own self-assessment, understanding ourselves. We have to understand our own strengths and limitations. We need to understand perhaps what our preferred approach to our work is. Why is this so important? Well, if you have a look at this table here, and this is full of an example from me, to be honest, we can just map along the bottom things that we find hard and things that we find easy. And then on the left-hand side, we've mapped those things that we don't enjoy versus those that we do enjoy. Now, the reason this is so important to understand is because it shapes our behavior. If you think about the top right-hand corner, the things that we find easy to do and that we enjoy doing, that we find them rewarding, fulfilling, are the things that we are most likely to volunteer to do. And actually, there is a virtuous circle at work here, because the more that I do of those things, because I find them enjoyable, the easier I'm going to find them, because I practice them more and I learn more skills. Contrast that with the bottom left-hand corner. There are things that I find quite hard to do. Maybe it's just not the way my brain works. And they are things that I also don't enjoy. Maybe they don't have much meaning for me. I can't personally see the value in them. And I don't think that that's maybe something I should be spending my time on. I just don't like doing them. And therefore, those are the sorts of things that I will avoid. So already you can start to see that when I'm working on a change, the top right-hand corner are the things that I'm most likely to want to get involved in. So I'm much more likely to want to offer to do a workshop for you than I would be, for example, filling in a form which maybe is the financial calculations of the return on investment from the change, because I'd find the idea of a spreadsheet something I don't enjoy, and I find sort of putting all the figures together quite difficult. Whereas talking to all of you, to engaging with you, to facilitating a discussion with you is something I would find really easy, and I genuinely enjoy it. I love working with people. So I understand what I would volunteer for and what I would shy away from. Now what I need to do is open my mind to thinking, well, actually, other people see the world completely differently. And I need to think about the fact that I need to make sure that in offering opportunities to get involved as part of making progress in every iteration, there'll be lots of activities, some of which appeal to me, but lots of things that maybe I'm not so keen on, but others would actually have in their top right-hand corner. So in trying to ensure that we're offering the greatest level of participation opportunities to people, we need to think about this chart and remember that people like to do things that maybe we don't enjoy or things that we don't find easy. There's another benefit to this very simple, very intuitive little chart, which is that it's about empathy. Think about the things you don't enjoy and that you find hard. They make you sigh with frustration. They get you stressed. You really don't enjoy them. So have a think about those very negative feelings. Think about the fear and the uncertainty that if I had to work on that kind of thing, that it would cause for me. In that way, you can start to walk in the shoes of people who, when you're asking them to do something as part of a new way of working that perhaps falls into their own category of finding it hard and don't enjoy it, you can understand some of the emotions. So this is a very simple way of starting to walk in the shoes of others, because you can start to understand how they might be feeling. it's a good idea to try to brainstorm things, particularly from a change management perspective, that you might enjoy doing and things you'd like to avoid doing. So what I've done is I've created for you a change capabilities index. So I've listed out a lot of the very common activities that we have to get involved in change. And you can use that as a starting point to consider which of those do you enjoy, which of those do you find easy. And you can also collaborate with others to do the same thing and work out where they find things easy and enjoyable and where they find things hard and don't enjoy, and see if there's similarities or in fact there's a direct contrast between you all. There are other preferences that we need to think about as well. We have a preference for when we do our work. Sometimes we are morning people and we like to get on with things first of all. And maybe what shapes that is that we like to get rid of the really difficult tasks first thing in the morning so we can have an easier day. Or we like to start gently with things that are quite simple to do and leave the hard stuff till later. Maybe we're evening people and actually we come to life later in the day. Again, do we like to leave things till later in the day if they're difficult, or do we like to leave the easy stuff to then? We also have a preference for who we work with, how we work with others. Do we like to be, in a noisy office with other people, or do we really enjoy working from home and giving ourselves the peace and quiet to really consider things? And we also have our own inbuilt preferences for the sorts of things that we think are important and should be considered, and other things that we think we can ignore. So all of those preferences come together. It's just understanding, how we like to get things done, always with the underlying consideration. This is me, but this might not be the others that I'm collaborating with. So if you like, you can think about your preferences for how you do things on a spectrum, and consider wherever you are on that spectrum that there'll be others that you're collaborating with who are at the completely other end of how they like to see the world. And the most important thing that we have to do, after all, we are the ones who are the change agents. We are the ones that are trying to get people involved in change and to create these new ways of working and adopt them. So it's our job to go along the spectrum to meet the preferences of others, not just to say, well, this is how I like things to be, so this is what we're going to stick with. So understand yourself is crucial, but you then need to always think, I wonder how others see the world and how can I meet their needs? So we've had a look at time, we've had a look whether we work with others or alone. We've had a think about maybe things that we think are important. Maybe financial information is important, or strategic information is important, or operational constraints are important. Maybe that will guide what we think are the really important tasks. But we've also got some other preferences for how we engage with change specifically. So we are looking at this very much through the lens of change management. And what's interesting about a new way of working is that how the world divides into sort of two groups about how we greet a change. So some people need to understand the change in relation to what happens today. So their immediate thought is very much in the present. They have a look at the current ways of working and they make that comparison between the current and the proposed changes. So they have a look at whether or not the new way of working will solve existing difficulties. Will it fix some mistakes, failures, and problems that we have? Or does it offer new opportunities that don't exist today? So does it fill gaps that don't exist today? So very much their present focus, they see it in relation to what happens today. The alternative is that people see the change from the future focus. What this really means is that they've already stepped into the future and they are looking about the change from how it will work in the future. And they're already starting to enjoy all of the advantages and all of the benefits because they're imagining working in this new way already. So they automatically step into the future and they will talk very positively about all of the new things and how everything is different. So it's a very, very different way of looking compared to the present focus. And we need to understand this because when we're describing change, we need to meet the needs of those that we're engaging with. If you're the future focused person, you need to talk about all the possibilities, opportunities, and what's really happening now we're working in this new way. But if you're talking to somebody who's present focused, you need to have the detail of how things work today and that comparison information available to you so that you can talk persuasively about how it's going to improve things or fill gaps that exist today. Another way of looking at preferences is also to think about how we like to engage with the information. Some people like to have detailed information, whereas others prefer a high-level summary. So the detailed information, you would actually have to get into almost a step-by-step guide of how the world is working. Now, if they're present focused, you'll have to do that step-by-step guide, lay out your information at quite a depth of detail in an orderly fashion, so it all makes sense, it all builds one after the other. And you need to do that for how things work today and how your change compares with how things work today. If they're future focused, you'll do the same thing. You'll have to give lots of details about how the change is operating, how it really works. So you almost have to step into that future state and imagining it working, but at quite a low level of detail to satisfy this preference. Alternatively, some people prefer the bigger picture, the sort of the high level summary. They don't want all the detail. They just want to see the sort of the basic idea, the sort of the end game, if you like. So you don't need to give all the detail, but you do need to be able to perhaps connect the big idea about your change and what it's doing for the organization with other big ideas, like the strategic direction of your organization and how it contributes to that. That's what you do if somebody was future focused. If they were present focused, you're giving them that high level summary about the bigger results that occur today, perhaps. So connect it back to sort of that big picture of what this delivers without all of the detail. Now, I've given you a table on this slide to show that there are these sort of 4 considerations, and you need to think about what your preferences are. Have a think about when you're imagining a change, do you immediately compare it to what happens today, or do you immediately step into it and see what's happening? How do you like information? Look at your emails. Look at the questions you pose to others. Are you seeking out lots of detail, or do you do a very high level summary when you're describing something? Equally, of course, you want to be considering how others might see the world. Have a look at emails from some of your key stakeholders and see how they're requesting information. See if you can get some insight. At the end of the day, it's probably very hard for you to work out what others' preferences are. So the basic rule is make sure that you're putting across information so that people can question, review, and engage with the change in a way that meets their preferences. So you have to provide detailed and a high-level summary. You have to provide it from the future and the present perspective. Now, we said that was all about self-assessment and really understanding your own preferences and how you like to work, how you like to engage with information. The final part of this personal assessment is emotional assessment. We need to understand our emotions. There are triggers that cause us to think and feel and emote in a certain way. There are things that trigger anger and frustration within us. There are things that make us really happy and really satisfied. We need to try to understand what those are and when we are likely to be displaying those sort of either end of the spectrum type emotions. Because, of course, the thing we need to think about is that our emotions have an effect on others. And after all, what we're trying to do is build trusting, empathetic relationships with others. We can emote all we like, but we shouldn't emote if we don't consider the effect that that has on others. How might they see us? I was working with somebody who was very much, she had many emotions that she always shared, but she didn't always consider how it might come across to others. And one of her most frequent habits was that after every meeting, she'd sort of come out of her office, and in front of her staff, she would talk about how frustrating the meeting has been and how difficult everything was. And she was always sort of sharing that level of sort of anger and frustration with others. And it created this feeling in her team that the change they were working on was impossible, when it really wasn't. Equally, I know that as part of my training role, I can be incredibly enthusiastic and very happy, and I'm enjoying my work. That isn't always a useful emotion to be sharing with people, particularly if they are suffering quite a lot of loss from the new ways of working that I'm trying to help implement. So I need to consider, it's great that I'm happy, but is that an emotion that I want to really push out to others? What I've included as part of this course is an emotional assessment questionnaire for you to take, for you to consider, think about all of the different emotions that sort of sit behind how you actually behave. Because I think getting to know yourself, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that you need to keep considering. So have a look at the emotional assessment questionnaire. Give it some consideration about maybe what triggers your anger, what triggers your happiness, and have a think about whether you're displaying those emotions to others, when you should display those emotions to others, and maybe when you should maybe take a step back and consider, is that the best version of me that I want to put across to others to help build relationships with them?